Hello, I'm Grayson Ottaway. Welcome back. This is Marvelous Videos. Shelob, the nightmarish, spider-like demon from the Lord of the Rings universe. Spiders often appear as side enemies in the Lord of the Rings, the most renowned of which is Shelob, who opposes Samwise and Frodo on their mission to destroy the One Ring. The movies employ CGI to build her frame, giving her a horrible appearance and transforming her into a demonic force of nature with whom the two hobbits must contend. Shelob's cinematic portrayal, however, does not express the true scope of her wickedness, for Tolkien portrays her as swollen and grown huge, weaving webs of gloom, for all living creatures were her meals, and her vomit was pure blackness.
I called you here for a reason.
Indeed, the author's works demonstrate that despite her modest role in the movies, Shelob carries the legacy of Middle-earth with her. Before we go into our explanation, a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to this channel. Small click for you, but for us means a whole lot. Thank you. Let's go. Exploring the origins of Shelob. Shelob was a giant spider and the progeny of Ungoliant, the primitive spider. She dwelt on the boundaries of Mordor in the Third Age and was notorious for feeding indiscriminately, feasting on the locals. Samwise Gamgee and Frodo Baggins meet her on their journey to destroy the One Ring. Shelob is really a Westron name that translates to female spider. It's a mix of the English words she, which means female, and lob, which means spider. The description of the giant spider-like creature was essentially identical in a previously unpublished draft of the chapter that would be ultimately titled Shelob's Lair, but its title was Ungoliant. It's been suggested that the huge spider that the hero fights is comparable to creatures from Edgar Rice Burroughs' books. However, Tolkien categorically rejected any direct influence. The terrifying creature, which resembles a spider, dwells in the highlands that encircle Mordor. In The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the creature stops Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood, and Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin, as they try to enter the Dark Land stealthily. She has a suspicion that the plump hobbits would make a tasty snack and be simple to digest. Of course, Shelob ends up receiving the shorter end of the stick, or might we say, the sting, much to her own astonishment and uncomfortable shock. In perhaps the most lopsided battle in narrative history, the angry Samwise Gamgee vanquishes the old demon. Sam is able to scare, blind, and ultimately hurt the beast until she retreats from the battle in terror while holding the burning phial of Galadriel in one hand and the short hobbit weapon sting in the other. We don't see Shelob again after that, with her principal role in the story lasting no longer than a section or two in the volumes. The creature leaves the narrative as fast as she arrived. But when the creature disappears from the story, she leaves behind much more than just a path of dripping animal blood. Numerous questions are unavoidably raised. What on earth is this thing doing here? Where did she come from? And how could she get this far? Who the hell is this creature anyway? We've arrived to provide answers to all these questions and more. So without further ado, let's get to Shelob's origin story. Without initially knowing Shelob's origins, it is challenging to describe who she is. We need to analyze Shelob's mother specifically. One of the most dreadful villains in all of fiction is her mother, an arachnid named Ungoliant, who appears in the Silmarillion. She is characterized as an unknown origin monster who is closely associated with darkness. As per Lord of the Rings legend, she could have come from the shadow that surrounds Arda, or the entirety of the world, a creature that was corrupted at the start of Middle-earth history by Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, preceding Sauron. She's mainly referenced to as Ungoliant. In any case, Ungoliant is a very powerful spiritual being that manifests as a giant spider. In a region of Middle-earth, in which the gloom was the darkest and heaviest in the world, she's shown spinning her dark webs in a crevice of the mountains. She is also symbolically linked to yearning and hunger. Although Ungoliant's origins are unknown, her role in the Silmarillion is unquestionably clear. Both of the two trees of Valinor, which serve as the primary sources of light for the world before the creation of the sun and the moon, are to be destroyed by Morgoth with the assistance of the unruly and willful monster. Morgoth follows her as she makes her way to the trees, enveloping the two in shadow and darkness. She physically drains the vitality out of the trees that provide light upon their arrival, leaving the planet in starry blackness. Ungoliant eventually engages Morgoth in combat before being forced away by a raging army of Balrogs. Although the Silmarillion just gives us the tidbit that her destiny is unknown, others claim that she perished long ago when she finally consumed herself out of starvation and vanished from history. Shelob is more than just a nasty old bug because of her mother being Ungoliant. It endows her with a demon lineage, transforming her into a terrifyingly frightful supernatural creature with a terribly evil past. The Ungoliant text is an intriguing read. She also spent some time living in the mythical mountain range known as Ered Gorgoroth, also dubbed the Mountains of Terror, according to the Silmarillion. She bears an unlimited number of horrible offspring there. Shelob most certainly spent a great deal of her life here with her terrifying sibling, into the dreadful place called the Nan Dungortheb, which means Valley of Dreadful Death in its exact translation. And all of this is intriguing for sure, but it doesn't really explain how, after Tolkien pauses the action in the Two Towers to detail how the bizarre spider-like monster patrolling Cirith Ungol's past came to be, the connection is neatly sealed. He reveals that she had lived there for ages as an evil arachnid creature. He continues she is one of the countless beings that thrived during Middle-earth's first age. Shelob escaped from destruction at an unknown period, yet no specific catastrophe is mentioned. It's assumed by many that he means the infamous War of Wrath, which concluded the First Age and submerged her birthplace under the sea. Whatever the reason, Shelob settles down in her big mountain abode before Sauron arrives. She only feeds herself while she is snug in her new den. The demonic dread starts to procreate from this newfound base of operations. These extend through the Mordor Mountains before, you guessed it, arriving at Mirkwood. None of Shelob's offspring ever reached her size, which is why Shelob was aptly alluded to in the Lord of the Rings as Shelob the Great, last child of Ungoliant to trouble the unhappy world. What a title. Shelob is ancient. She also has an odd obsession with her seclusion, diet, and ego. The creature exhibits a wide range of bizarre and repulsive traits. The majority of her tales center around either a considerable period of stagnant living in vile gloom, or food, and more food. Shelob seems to be perpetually hungry, much like her mother. She's constantly searching to find her next meal, which she obtains through a wide range of truly terrible methods. To begin with, Shelob both marries and murders her own offspring, and although consumption isn't explicitly mentioned, it certainly seems plausible. In the Two Towers book, her kids are referred to as her inferior progeny, bastards of the unhappy partners, her own offspring, and those she slaughtered. She may have eaten some of her children, but many of them undoubtedly escaped, taking the family farm to other areas of the nation and the world. Shelob consumed whatever she could in her hunger, literally. According to the Two Towers text, all living creatures were her meal. The villain may have unlimited hunger and endless taste, but she still had preferences. As the might of Mordor grows around her nest, there are less and less men to be eaten, despite the fact that she is mainly portrayed as eating elves and men in the Age of the Lord of the Rings novels. She resorts to the disgruntled orcs, since she has few other alternatives. alternatives, and they are said to be bad food. According to Gollum Smeagol in the third movie, all she receives are dirty orcs that don't taste good at all. Still, it begs the intriguing issue of whose side Shelob is actually on, given her eagerness to feed on the local Dark Lord soldiery.
I know why you are here.
Return what you have stolen.
Silence, Ringmaker. You forget yourself.
Shelob in the Third Age explored. The idea of Shelob feeding on orcs raises the question of whether Shelob is Sauron's friend or foe. The answer is a little complex, but based on the numerous allusions to Shelob found in Tolkien's writings, it's relatively straightforward to conclude that she's not his adversary. Having said that, she doesn't appear to be his pal either. Shelob follows the rhythm of her own dark drum. She's uninterested in power struggles, and the prospect of obtaining the most critical ring of power is absolutely meaningless to her. Shelob, true to her ancestry, is sincerely fascinated only with eating and her own dreary existence, period. This does not seem to mesh with Sauron's broader ambitions and conquests, but Tolkien did add that the Dark Lord and Shelob get along. In fact, they are reasonably friendly neighbors. While she occasionally eats Sauron's slaves, she repays him in service by defending the passage of Cirith Ungol from invaders. Sauron doesn't simply think that this is just a good deal, he understands that the bargain is somewhat unfair for Shelob. It thrilled him that she hid in the highlands on the outside of his domain, according to the Two Towers. In fact, he makes a special effort to compliment her for her freelance work. How? By sending her goodies. The book informs us that Sauron occasionally delivered her prisoners who he had no other uses for, much like a lord rewarding his pet. It goes on to say that he planned to have them hauled to her hole, and a report of the move she made was delivered back to him. Interestingly, Shelob's reputation for unending hunger contributes to the complete Cirith Ungol poisoned Frodo problem, which begins when she first meets Gollum. Gollum eventually comes and finds Shelob while searching for the One Ring. He is struck by her heinous nature and practically kneels down and venerates her. She saves the poor wretch in exchange for his promise to provide her with food. Gollum takes on the job of personal shopper, venturing out into the great big world to fetch Shelob better meat than her monotonous Orsich diet. He appears to be so terrified by her domineering personality that he travels to her many times. This occurs frequently enough for the neighboring orcs to identify him and allude to him as Shelob's sneak. As stated in the Two Towers, he eventually brings Frodo and Sam inside her cave to deliver her a particularly delectable treat. During this time, Gollum is plotting his own double betrayal. He seeks to reclaim the ring when Shelob devours the hobbits. Gollum promises himself that when he gets his precious back, she will know, and he will repay her. Unfortunately, even the best-laid schemes of mice, men, and distorted hobbit-like villains may go wrong. When Shelob is vanquished by Sam, Gollum's plans fall apart. The passer's monster guardian gets injured and flees into her cave in anguish. Shelob vanishes from the plot at this moment. Sam snatched the One Ring from Frodo and left his corpse, thinking he was dead, but subsequently realized that Shelob's poison was not meant to kill its victims, but rather to put them asleep in order to keep their flesh fresh. It is unknown if Shelob spent years in her cave healing herself from the inside and rebuilding her eyes until she was ready to hunt again in the Efel Duath valleys with her deathly hunger. She may have perished from famine as a result of her incapacity to hunt when she was blind. Exploring her appearance in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Unlike in the novels, Shelob initially appears in Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, rather than in The Two Towers, because if she arrived in The Two Towers, there would be really nothing for Frodo and Sam to confront in the final film. Shelob appears in this depiction as a CGI-generated beast about 8 feet long and 17 feet abroad. Shelob is seen in the 2003 film The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, to have a retractable poisonous sting at the back end between the spinnerets, similar to a wasp's sting. This is hugely different from actual spiders, which inject poison with their fangs, yet it is realistic in relation to the story. Shelob also has a gaping mouth, while spiders mostly suck juices. In the novel, however, groupings of eyes are referenced, which may imply compound eyes, similar to those found in bugs. The Shelob in the film, on the contrary, does not have such eyes, which is a Lycocity hunting spider, which Shelob most strongly resembles, must have two huge eyes looking forward, with a few tiny ones practically buried below. The only spider with clustered eyes, while not genuine compound eyes, is the daddy long-legged spider of the family Falsidae, although Shelob does not resemble these relatively lanky and delicate spiders in other ways. Is Shelob really a giant spider? Shelob might be anything but a spider. She does, in fact, have a spider-like body with the capability to weave webs to trap victims and immobilize them, so she may slowly feed on them. But behind the surface trappings, she's similar to the Balrog than any of Middle-earth's more commonplace monsters. Being Ungoliant's direct descendant, Shelob was obviously more formidable than the spiders of Mirkwood. In addition, she was the last of Ungoliant's offspring to survive the War of the Ring. Shelob's cunning and longevity testify to her mother's blood, but her combat with Sam proves she is more than just flesh and blood. According to the book, the light from Galadriel's phial fills her with horror when Sam holds it and penetrates the wounds inflicted by the elven sword sting. Furthermore, the ring improves his hearing, enabling him to detect Shelob's seething sorrow. That might be an unintended consequence of the ring, yet it resonates back to the tongue of the Mirkwood's spiders, implying a deep relationship between the two. In any case, exterior looks are definitely deceptive. Despite her spider-like appearance, Shelob's wicked roots needed elven magic to halt. Shelob's fate after the encounter with Frodo and Sam. Gollum sent Frodo to Shelob's lair when he passed across Cirith Ungol, the passage that led to Mordor. Shelob was able to stab and immobilize Frodo here, stringing him up for a snack. Sam appeared as Frodo's hero, battling the spider with a short sword, as well as the phial of Galadriel, which he used to blind her. Sam manages to strike Shelob in the stomach and send her scurrying back into her lair. Given her stature and sensitivity to the knife, the wound was most likely unpleasant but not lethal, implying she was still alive when Sauron fell. It is merely said in the text that Shelob was beaten, and whether she lay there in her lair nursing her hatred and suffering from hunger till she wove her horrible traps once more in the Mountains of Shadow, the story doesn't disclose. This suggests that Tolkien did not have a solution for Shelob's destiny. However, with Sauron's defeat, the elves fled Middle-earth, and thus the Age of Men commenced. It also signaled the end of many creatures and horrors in the realm, as malevolent entities such as orcs and trolls faded away. As a result, Shelob may have been killed by men or had been left on her own for so long that she perished. There's even a possibility she followed in her mother's footsteps and became so ravenous that she devoured herself. What made Shelob so powerful? Shelob, being a spawn of Ungoliant, would be classed as a part demon, part spider, to an unspecified extent, in a physically spider form. Very similar to other spiders, Shelob has spindly legs, many eyes, and dangerous chelicerae. Her skull was crisscrossed with scars, and she was missing many eyes. She would usually immobilize her prey, using her paralyzing sting, enabling her to feast on her prey at her leisure. But she was also able to crush them to death by throwing herself on them with great speed. The orcs saw how she usually paralyzed her victims and trapped them in webs, thereby allowing them to remain alive for a brief period of time before killing them. Shelob had an outstretched head with two massive clusters of multi-windowed eyes, massive horns, and a short stalk-like neck. Her beak is dripping with poison. She had an enormous frame that resembled a swollen sack. Her torso was dark with livid markings and a pale and glowing belly. Her legs were bowed with large knobbed joints high over her back. Her legs were also covered in hairs that protruded like steel spikes and possessed a hook on each of their bottom ends. Shelob also had a sting. Her skin was so robust that it couldn't be pierced with the force of a man, elf, or dwarf due to the numerous layers of growth. Her eyes constituted the only tender area on her face. Shelob's lore in a popular video game. Shelob features in the video game Middle-earth: Shadow of War, where she can morph into a human lady with black hair and ink-black clothing, unlike any previous manifestation of the character. She can also physically combat the Nazgul and provide visions. She despises Sauron and has reservations about Celebrimbor. Shelob is classified as a Maya in the mobile edition of Shadow of War. Additionally, this Shadow of War iteration of Shelob is really the only one capable of transforming into a human. Shelob was Sauron's accomplice and lover during the Second Age, before he betrayed her for the chance to malign Suladin using a ring of power. Shelob, surrounded by troops, slew them in wrath and fled to Cirith Ungol, pledging vengeance. Shelob has a premonition of Celebrimbor and Talion defeating and trapping Sauron before going on to dominate Middle-earth as the supposed Bright Lord once the new ring is forged. To help stop this vision from becoming a reality, she kidnaps Celebrimbor and pushes Talion to hand the new ring into her possession. She reveals to Talion visions of Minas Ithal's decimation and evolution into Minas Morgul, enlisting the help of Gollum, who reveres her as the Dark Mistress. When Talion tries and fails to stop Minas Ithal, as well as Palantir, from ending up in the possession of the Nazgul, Sauron discovers that Shelob has already been plotting against him and orders the Nazgul to assassinate. Shelob can stand up to the Wraiths, who are repulsed by Eltariel and Talion. Weakened by the conflict and the light of Galadriel, possessed by Eltariel, Shelob hands the new ring to Talion and retires to her cave. Shelob's efforts to create discord between Celebrimbor and Talion finally end in Talion receiving the undead elf for what he is, an aspiring dictator, prompting Celebrimbor to seize the new ring and control Eltariel, abandoning Talion for dead. Shelob comes to the ailing Talion in a vision, disclosing her motivations for supporting him and pushing him to seize the Ring of Power possessed by Isildur and still keep battling. Shelob witnesses Talion's decades-long fight against Sauron's soldiers and eventual evolution into a Nazgul, prophesying that his deeds had provided time for the One Ring to be located and an operation to destroy it launched, assuring Sauron's ultimate destruction. Once Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer, neared her cave, Shelob saw he would eventually succumb to the power of the One Ring and fought him in order to speed his trip to Mount Doom, at which point Gollum would unintentionally perform what Frodo had not and destroy the One Ring. When the new Middle-earth Shadow of War narrative trailer was published, it's safe to say it lifted a few eyebrows. The revelation that the game's storyteller, initially seen in the game's unveiling trailer, seems to be none other than Shelob, came in the thick of a lot of weapon-wielding and plot exposition. This surprised everyone, knowing that Shelob is a massive spider. How could a colossal, malicious spider get up in Shadow of War wearing a beautiful dress and inhabiting a human body, we wondered? Or more specifically, why? When Michael DePlater, Monolith's creative vice president, was questioned about the studio's decision to transform Shelob into a beautiful girl, he had some rather more detailed lore arguments. To begin, it's critical to realize that DePlater's attitude to Shelob stems from his belief that both she and Gollum are the real heroes in The Lord of the Rings. Simply said, he believes that Frodo fails to toss the ring into the flames at Mount Doom at the critical moment, and that Gollum achieves what he fails, albeit by plunging into the fire himself. As per De Plater, Shelob saw Frodo's weaknesses and struck a deal with Gollum to speed his journey to Mount Doom and, indeed, the climactic encounter in which the ring was destroyed. It also helps to explain why Shelob attempted to devour Frodo in the Two Towers. That dichotomy of being one of Middle-earth's saviors while actually being a giant horrific spider, according to De Plater, led the team to portray Shelob as a prominent figure in the shadow of war. Two factors served as a beginning point for their idea. A large part of the work they do is look at the personas that they are sort of in the grey zone. They're not quite as purely virtuous as Aragorn or Gandalf. They're pretty human. Characters they are inspired by are the likes of Boromir, Denethor, and Saruman, because the creators of the game believe that Lord of the Rings is frequently portrayed as simplistic, black and white, good people against bad guys, but in fact, it has these wonderfully nuanced characters. So you have Shelob symbolizing darkness and Galadriel symbolizing light. Hence you have a duality among these two great ladies who are basically battling one another in the exact way that the game has a lot of dualism. So the creators thought that these two in distinction are really fascinating, and the manner in which Galadriel basically coerced and even sent people away on these distinct quests, like trialing the Fellowship using the mirror at Lothlorien, and yet ultimately their journey to decimate the ring would have ended in failure if they were left to their own devices. Then you picture Shelob as a dark mirror of her, who had this henchman, Gollum, who eventually succeeded when you think about it. They were also thinking about how, not deliberately, but it seems like Galadriel and Gandalf misrepresented to the Fellowship a very little bit about their possibilities, and what distinguishes Shelob is that she is absolutely honest. So she's evil, or thought to be terrible, but she possesses this honesty about her, and so they started thinking about her as a dark mirror to Galadriel, and playing the position in their tale of that storyteller, and what that might look like. That explains why Shelob plays a more significant part in Shadow of War, but how precisely is she able to assume a human form? We must look into her ancestors for answers. Ungoliant, characterized by Tolkien as being an evil spirit in the guise of a spider, was Shelob's mother. Of course, Shelob adopts the same form, but the fact remains Ungoliant is still a spirit that has chosen to take the shape of a spider, as is Shelob. De Plater expanded on this to clarify not only how Shelob may assume a human body, but also why she is so inextricably linked to Talion and Celebrimbor's mission in the first place. He said that the only explanation for why she might take the appearance of a scary spider is to instill dread. There is a psychological component to this. And the second connection with Ungoliant, and also the essence of darkness, is this statement about how she despises light yet desires it, and therefore Celebrimbor, as well as the new ring, symbolize this new entity that she has a love-hate relationship with. So there we have it. Shelob changes into a human figure, both because it is in her ability to do so and because she feels compelled to participate in Talion's quest. In human form, talking with him should be easier. In any case, it's less jarring than having a giant spider as the video game's storyteller. The conclusion. Tragically for the spider, she would confront the file of Galadriel, as well as the fearless will of Samwise Gamgee. The gardener severely injured Shelob with Bilbo's infamous sting, driving her to retreat into the darkest recesses of her cave. Some have speculated that she dies as a result of her incapacity to hunt while blind. This is doubtful though, because Sam only jabs one of her eyeballs out, and also the file of Galadriel doesn't really appear to permanently blind her. Even though she is not discussed again, it's conceivable that Shelob is still lurking in the world's darkest corners. If you like our content, don't forget to please leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Have a good one. Be safe. Thank you.